The imposition of the 20% VAT on private school fees by the government has ignited a maelstrom of controversy, with Bridget Phillipson's claim that middle-class parents support the policy, acting as fuel for the fire. However, public support or popularity doesn't necessarily make a policy right, nor does the loud clamour of a vocal minority equate to broad social endorsement. The issue is also there with the Shamima Begum and Asma al-Assad issue. The fact that people speak out against something doesn't automatically mean that it's wrong, and so on. And people are automatically approving something. This isn't a popularity contest. This is about what is right or wrong. And ultimately, morality has to underpin the rule of law. If it doesn't, we're in a very strange country. And there are plenty of countries where the rule of law is not based on morality. You only have to look across to Russia. And, attempting to use education as a tool for social engineering, again, look at Russia. Especially with the speed and the lack of foresight exhibited here, is fraught with peril. In fact, Russia's institution of the laws for educating children on Russian nationality and the importance of the special military operation took nearly 9 months to deploy into schools, or nearly a year in some cases. And yet Rachel Reeves has done this knee-jerk VAT within 6 months. And I think it's important to explore the critical issues about this sort of policy. Whether you approve of the VAT being imposed on private education or not, it's about the speed of this policy, and it's about the effects that it has caused, not just schools closing, but children being pulled out of education in the run-up to important exams like GCSEs and A-levels. Phillipson, supported by Keir Starmer, has argued that ending the VAT exemption will generate an additional £1.7 billion annually for state education. It's questionable, enabling investment in teachers and resources for the 94% of children in state schools. As I say, highly questionable. The logic rests on shaky foundations. The rhetoric of tax breaks as a luxury. Phillipson's rhetoric, it paints private school parents as a wealthy elite, enjoying unwarranted tax advantages, yet many of these families are far from affluent, with some remortgaging homes to afford fees. And the average annual fee of £18,000 is it's not luxurious, but a calculated sacrifice. This middle-class support, claiming middle-class parents support this raid, rings hollow, and many middle-class families who have been priced out of private education are not cheering the others to be forced into the same position. Many middle-class parents, anyway, are effectively paying school fees. They've simply moved house into a good catchment area, which one might argue is even more expensive than paying the school fees for a minor private school. This policy has been hastily conceived and poorly executed, leading to chaos that disproportionately harms children. Thousands of children face upheaval as parents pull them from private schools because of the additional cost burden, and local authorities, including Oxfordshire and Surrey, have warned that placing these students in nearby state schools, particularly in GCSE and A-level years, is logistically impossible, particularly because in many subjects there are set texts which simply aren't covered in the state schools, or it's almost impossible to move a child from one school to another once the GCSE or A-level exams have started teaching. Once that syllabus has started, it's very difficult to reproduce the actual syllabus in another school. Differences in exam boards as well. Coursework requirements and curricula exacerbate the challenges that children face when they are expected to move mid-year. The risk to exam results is not hypothetical. The Independent Schools Council, the ISC, has highlighted that moving Year 10 and Year 11 pupils mid-course jeopardises their future, especially in subjects reliant on coursework or unique curricula, such as IGCSEs. It's the same nonsense that occurs with students, foreign students who've come over here, and on their 18th birthday, suddenly they have to renew their visas. And if there's a mistake or something, suddenly in the middle of their A-level courses, they find themselves expelled from the country or not able to come back to finish their schooling. I've seen this on a number of occasions. Yes, it can be dismissed as, oh, this is bureaucratic, but it's a bureaucracy that hits many students. We sell our education, we've commodified our education, and then we put barriers in place that make it almost impossible for people to follow through. And the government estimate that only 0.1% of private school pupils will transfer to state schools. That seems widely and wildly optimistic. In reality, local councils are already stretched thin, and absorbing an influx of students could lower standards for everybody. And the Rachel Reeves' prediction of 1.7 billion windfall that will occur ignores the potential closures of private schools unable to weather the financial storm, and such closures would result in job losses, reduced tax revenues, and an increased financial burden on the state sector in consequence. The policy faces ongoing legal challenges, which will be expensive, and if overturned, the government risks compensation claims for disrupted education and livelihoods, further eroding its fiscal case. Critics, including Priti Patel, have rightly accused Labour of indulging in class warfare, and this tax appears designed less to fund state education than to punish aspiration. While some may perceive private education as an affront to equality, dismantling it without ensuring alternatives is destructive, not progressive. The ethics of rolling this policy out mid-academic year reflects a disregard for the stability and the well-being of children. And surely an implementation timeline aligned with the academic calendar would have mitigated some disruption. And education is not a zero-sum game. Elevating standards in state schools does not necessarily undermine the private sector. And in order to elevate standards in state sectors, you don't necessarily need to undermine the private sector. Using education for ideological purposes, particularly in such haste, is irresponsible, unfair, spiteful. And the VAT rise on private education is a classic example of policy making driven by ideology rather than practicality. It punishes families striving to give their children the best opportunities, creates upheaval in the lives of thousands of pupils, and adds strain to an already stretched state system. Loud noise does not indicate mass support. Public popularity does not render a policy morally or practically sound. If Labour truly wishes to elevate state education, which it should, it must invest thoughtfully rather than scapegoat the private sector in a reckless experiment destined for failure all round, destined to undermine the quality of our education in a thoroughgoing fashion. If we want to ensure that our education is utterly divisive, that the rich can have private education and the poor cannot, then this is the way to go about doing so. The much better option would be to improve state education so private education is unnecessary. But at the moment, the STEM the STEM requirements, the requirements of particular communities, simply are not catered for in state education. And parents have every right and every responsibility to ensure that their children get the best possible education that they can get. And if that means sacrificing an extra car or taking out an extra mortgage, then I think that's what a lot of parents would do. Or moving house so that they're in a better catchment area. It's the same instinct. It's the same idea to get the best for your children.